Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to take a look at the interesting topic of what are the time gaps between movies and shows and their associated post-credit scenes. So, taking this as an example, you have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which ended with sweet little baby Groot sitting on Drax's shoulder, and then had a post-credit scene of teenage Groot, which clearly is years later in the timeline. So, I'll admit, going into this, I kind of thought one thing was going to be the case, and it wasn't quite what I thought. So I'm going to ask you to think in your head of there's 84 total post-credit scenes. Of the 84 post-credit scenes, what percentage of them do you think have a time gap of, say, more than 3 months? Think about that as we go into this. And then I'll also say up front, obviously, if I'm going to talk about post-credit scenes, and if you haven't seen a given entry, it's a mild spoiler, right? I'm not going into great detail at all. Most people already know what the post-credit scenes are, but I'm just throwing that out that there could be mild spoilers in that regard. All right, without further ado, let's dive right in and see what we can find out. And I will mention that we do have the contest running through the month of August. The winner will be able to choose from one of these 3 books, and all you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave a comment on a video. More videos you comment on, the more chances you have to win. And I'll announce the winner in September in a video. Okay, so for the post-credit scenes, I have broken them into categories. And one of the categories is post-credits that are basically just trailers for something else. And the reason I'm breaking these into pieces is, obviously, if you're showing a trailer for a later entry, there's going to be a gap in time. There's only one instance where we don't find that to be the case, and we'll get to that. But so you kind of need to break these into categories. But yeah, anytime we're showing a trailer or a snippet from something later, there's going to be a gap. Case in point, Captain America: The First Avenger basically shows a trailer for the Avengers, and in the timeline, that is 67 years and 2 months later. So yeah, you kind of expect a gap in these cases. All right, so for example, Avengers Endgame, after its initial release, at least, added a preview for Spider-Man Far From Home. So really nice cooperation between Disney and Sony there, and from a timeline standpoint, that's 8 months later. On the flip side then, Spider-Man No Way Home returned the favor, and Sony basically showed a preview for a Disney film, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Now, both of those are occurring, at least the main part of the movie, in November of 2024. In some cases, there may be days, maybe even a week, but as long as it's within the same month, I'm putting that into a category of month or less, right? So they're both occurring in November of 2024. All right, then we have Loki Season 1, Episode 6. That basically had a mid-credit scene that told us there is going to be a Season 2. I don't know whether to call this a trailer or not, but pretty exciting when we saw that, right? And of course, Loki is happening outside of time, so what does time mean anyway? I really hope in Loki Season 2 they explain that, by the way. It seems like that's going to be an important part of Season 2 is how does time work in the TVA? So we'll see. But for now, it's outside of time. Okay, then we have The Incredible Hulk, and its end credit scene shows a snippet from The Consultant. And technically speaking, The Consultant only shows a snippet from The Incredible Hulk because one line from The Incredible Hulk doesn't make it into The Consultant one-shot. It's so frustrating. But nonetheless, from a timeline standpoint, the one-shot is happening 1 month after the movie itself, The Incredible Hulk movie. Then we have Iron Man 2. Basically, it has an end credit scene that shows a snippet from Thor. Because those are all happening during Fury's big week, it's all the same week. Or the same, well, yeah, this is the same week. What am I saying? Which is in June of 2010. So there's no gap in time there. At least it's less than a month. All right, then we have Captain America: The First Avenger. In addition to the trailer that I mentioned earlier, it also shows literally a snippet from the Avengers, which would be 67 years and 2 months later in the timeline. All right, then Ant-Man has an end credit that shows a snippet from Captain America: Civil War. From a timeline standpoint, that is 9 months later. Then we have Doctor Strange, which shows a mid-credit scene that's a snippet from Thor Ragnarok, which in the timeline is 10 months later. And then we have Avengers Endgame. Now this one's interesting. It actually features, it's a snippet, but it's an audio snippet. So I'm including it because it's just kind of cool. And the sound effect is from the first Iron Man movie. So technically speaking, it's negative 13 years and 11 months. So whatever you want to do with that. But anyway, I just think it's cool, so I wanted to bring that up. Now, this one is interesting. So Ms. Marvel, Season 1, Episode 6, has a mid-credit scene that we now know is a snippet from the Marvels. At the time, it looked like it was a new scene, but it actually turns out it's a snippet. And even more crazy, we can't figure out how much time there is here. in the gap. I mean, Miss Marvel ended in October of 2025. There's no way the Marvels can be any earlier than November of 2026. So we're talking about at least a year gap. Who saw that coming? So more to follow on that. But for now, let's just say it's over a year. It sure seems. Okay, then we have Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. It has an end credit scene that shows a snippet from Loki season 2. So what do you do with this, right? Because Quantumania is in July of 2026, and I guess the TVA is at the end of time. I don't know. Of course, this is Loki going back in time. So anyway, I don't know what to do with it. You can decide how much of a time gap there is in your mind. Who knows? All right, so now we're moving into post-credit scenes that I'm calling humorous. I don't mean to belittle them at all. They're very important. Everything has timeline clues in the MCU. But I just think it's interesting to classify the ones that are more for a joke versus the ones that are clearly very, very important to see. All right, so the Avengers has an end credit scene of them just sitting around eating shawarma. That happens at the same time as the movie itself. Then we have the Item 47 one-shot, which, by the way, was meant, I believe, as a pilot for Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., even though none of the characters, the two characters, showed up in the show. I wish they had. But nonetheless, we see Claire killing time at the S.H.I.E.L.D. headquarters. That happens at the same time as the one-shot. Then we have Iron Man 3. This one's kind of weird. Iron Man 3 is basically a retelling of the story by Tony to Bruce, who's falling asleep. So, I mean, the post-credit is actually the movie, right? Because the post-credit is him literally telling the story. However you want to view it, the post-credit is 1 month after when the movie actually happened. So at least according to the wiki, and I believe the wiki, it makes sense. It would need to be well into January, probably early January, but it's later. So we're going to call it a month later. All right. Then we have the Agent Carter one-shot. Its mid-credit shows Howard Stark and Dum Dum Dugan chilling and relaxing together. It happens at the same time as the one-shot itself in March of 46. Then we have All Hail the King's one-shot. And its mid-credit scene shows Justin Hammer upset at the attention Trevor is getting, and that's in December, same time as the one-shot itself. And it has a second one, which make sure you catch these. They're really great. They're very funny. It has, this time, Justin Hammer comparing himself to Tony Stark, and it's hysterical. Plus, it is arguably the first LGBTQ relationship in the MCU, so it's very notable for that. All right. Then we have Guardians of the Galaxy's pre-credit showing Baby Groot dancing. So love that, and it's happening at the same time as the movie itself. We have Guardians of the Galaxy's end credit showing the Collector and Howard the Duck sitting in the museum's ruins, and that's happening at the same time as the movie itself. We have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2's pre-credit showing Kraglin failing to get Yondu's arrow to work and, of course, impaling Drax in the process. It happens at the same time as the movie itself, basically right after the movie. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2's mid-credit shows Peter Quill and the adolescent Groot. This is one we talked about earlier. So the movie is in October of 2014, but this scene is presumably very close to Infinity War in a time frame, so therefore the jump is 3 years and 7 months. Then we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2's end credit scene showing the Watcher and their informant, R.I.P. Stan Lee, and this is presumably happening around the same time as the movie itself. Then this one's kind of funny. Spider-Man Homecoming's end credit shows the actual filming of the Captain America instructional video, or videos, because he mentions how many more of these do we have to film. So technically it's a flashback. So it's -4 years and 3 months from when Homecoming ends. I should mention that, by the way. I'm going off the point when the movie ends, because Homecoming technically starts in June, but it ends in September. And then likewise, this scene is presumably within the month after Avengers itself, and Avengers is in May of 2012. So therefore, presumably Captain America turned right around and filmed these in June of 2012. Okay, then we have Thor Ragnarok. Its end credit scene shows the Grandmaster discussing the state of the revolution. Really funny scene, and it's obviously happening right around the time of the end of the movie. Then we have Ant-Man and the Wasp's end credit scene, which shows the giant pet ant playing the drums. That happens at the same time as the end of the movie. We have Captain Marvel's end credit scene showing Goose hacking up the Tesseract. That happens at the same time as the end of the movie. We have Spider-Man No Way Home's More Fun edition, which added an end credit scene of Betty giving a final graduation day report. Now, the movie, No Way Home, technically ends in December because we see him swinging over New York at Christmas time. And then this would be at graduation time, so a 6-month jump for this post-credit scene. Then we have Hawkeye, Season 1, Episode 6, with the mid-credit scene showing the full version of the Save the City musical. You either loved this or you hated it. I liked it. But yeah, it was an interesting choice for an end credit scene. But presumably this is what Hawkeye was watching, so happening at the same time as the series itself. Then we have Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness end credit scene showing the spell wearing off of Pizza Papa, which is presumably happening at the same time as the movie itself. We have I Am Groot, Season 1, Episode 5's mid-credit, showing all of Groot's drawing materials floating out in space, which the wiki places the I Am Groot shorts a few months after Guardians 2, other than obviously the first one, which is between Guardians 1 and 2. But so this particular short, it places in November. Makes sense to me. It'll be interesting to see how far the timeline advances as we get the Season 2 of I Am Groot. I mean, somebody had suggested, wouldn't it be wild if we got all the way to him being teenage Groot? Anything's possible, right? Anything's possible. But so basically this is happening at the same time as the episode itself. Then we have She-Hulk Season 1, Episode 1, with the mid-credits showing Jen finding out about Captain America's virginity. This one really made me laugh. It really did. This is happening at the same time as the episode itself, so February of 2025. All right, then we have Season 1, Episode 2's mid-credit, where Jen's helping around doing some tasks at the house, happening at the same time as the episode is ending, so May of 2025. Then we got this one, right? Another one, you either love it or hate it. I thought it was funny, but I know some people cannot stand it. Anyway, Episode 3 has a mid-credit scene showing, we'll just say, Jen and Megan Thee Stallion partying to music. Anyway, it happens at the same time as the episode itself, so there's no gap in time, May of 2025. Then you gotta love this one. So you go from the dancing one to one of my favorite all-time post-credit scenes. Yep, it is Wong and Madison watching TV together. So cute. Happening at the same time as the episode itself, so June of 2025. Then we have the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Specials post-credit with Rocket and Cosmo decorating Groot for the holiday, obviously happening at the same time as that holiday special, so December of 2025. Then we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and its end credit shows Peter Quill returning to Earth to see his grandfather. This is when we're able to place and date all of Guardians in August of 2026, and presumably is within a week or two of the movie itself. Okay, so those are the ones that are humorous. Now we'll go to the ones that I'm calling advancing the story, although again, everything, even if it's humorous, technically advances the story, but these are the ones you don't want to miss. So, okay, Iron Man's end credit scene shows Nick Fury introducing the Avengers Initiative. That's obviously happening at the same time as the movie. Thor's end credit scene shows Loki controlling Dr. Selvig as they look at the Tesseract. That happens at the same time as the movie. The Avengers has a mid-credit scene showing the Other speaking to Thanos, happening at the same time as the movie. Thor: The Dark World has a mid-credit scene showing the delivery of the Reality Stone to the Collector, happening again at the same time as the movie. Thor: The Dark World also has an end credit scene showing Thor and Jane reuniting. I kind of put quoting marks around Jane, though, because I've heard that that's actually not Natalie Portman in this scene because she was busy and couldn't film this, and so it's his wife, supposedly. It's Hemsworth's wife. If that's true, let me know. It's a cool story nonetheless, but it's kind of why he's covering her face with his hand. So, wild. Anyway, regardless of who it is, it's happening at the same time as the movie itself. We have Captain America the Winter Soldier's mid-credit, giving us our first look at Wanda and Pietro. Now, this one's interesting. First of all, the wiki places Captain America the Winter Soldier in January of 2014, and it does that because while the foliage doesn't really look like it's January of 2014, it's the only way to make it work with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 1, and clearly this crosses over with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So that's why it's in January. But then the question is, why place this post-credit scene in January? Well, remember, the Scepter has been in Hydra's control since Avengers movie itself in May of 2012. We learned that in Endgame when the strike team picked up the Scepter right away. So basically, Hydra's had the Scepter for almost 2 years at this point. So it makes sense that this post-credit scene would be placed around that same time. Now, a lot of these are guesses on the wiki because we just don't know, right? Maybe the timeline book will tell us, maybe it won't. But I like this placement. It makes a lot of sense to me. But that's why, literally, this one is being said to happen around the same time as the movie. So, works for me. Okay, then we have Captain America the Winter Soldier's end credit scene showing Bucky in the museum learning his past. Happens at the same time as the movie itself. We have Avengers Age of Ultron's end credit showing Thanos beginning his quest for the Infinity Stones. This is another post-credit scene that's pretty controversial. It's hard to figure out, since we know from Infinity War that poor Eitri was basically had his hands cut off after he made the Infinity Glove for Thanos. When does this all happen, right? Well, keep in mind, Loki is disguised as Odin right now at this point in the timeline and has been for a while. The Nine Realms are a disaster. So there was actually a quote from the Russo brothers where they said they feel this particular scene happens at the same time of Age of Ultron because they make a point of no one from Asgard went to check on Eitri for a long time. So it's kind of depressing. If this end credit scene really does happen around the time of Age of Ultron, man, Eitri's been sitting there depressed and sad for years in that Infinity War scene. Oof, wild. Let me know what you think on this placement. I agree with the wiki, and mainly because I agree with the Russo brothers. They said this is when this happens. Okay. All right, so then we have Ant-Man's mid-credit scene showing Hope learning about her new Wasp costume. This one happens around the same time as the movie itself. We have Captain America Civil War. The mid-credit shows Bucky going into cryostasis until a cure can be found. Now, the reason this is not being placed immediately after Civil War, because if you watch Civil War, you could kind of think, well, they took him right there, right? Why would they wait a month to take him to Wakanda? Remember, though, it took a while for the breakout on the raft, because we learned in the Black Widow movie that she was the one that helped with the breakout. She went back to help break them out. And the Black Widow movie itself spans several weeks. So, yeah, strange as it may seem, it's a while before Bucky ends up there in cryostasis. And not more than a month, but just still, it was... In fact, it's even after the Black Panther movie has completed. Now, remember, Shuri says, oh, no, another white boy to help get better. She was probably already planning on working on Bucky. They'd probably already discussed it well in advance of him coming there. And she said that in relation to Ross coming, right? So now she's working on two of them. But the bottom line is, yeah, when you place this in the timeline, this is several weeks after Civil War. Wild, isn't it? Okay, tell me what you think. If you don't agree, that's okay. But I agree with the wiki and all the sources it has pulled to place this here. Okay, then we have Captain America Civil War. End credit scene shows Spider-Man learning about his new tech. That happens at the same time as the movie itself. We have Doctor Strange's then end credit scene showing Mordo deciding there are too many sorcerers. Now, the reason this is being placed a full 7 months after the end of the movie is because Mordo himself says he's left Comertage months ago and has been on this mission. So by the time he shows up in this end credit scene, it's not clear how many months exactly, but I like the fact that the wiki tries its best to take all the facts and then says, okay, we're just going to put a stake in the ground, 7 months. At the end of the day, until the timeline book comes out, if it even goes into this level of detail, we're not going to know for sure. But again, I have mad respect for the wiki of just coming up with something with the best of their ability and the knowledge before us. All right, then we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2's mid-credit scene showing several Ravagers getting the team back together. And that happens basically around the same time as the movie itself, which is wild, because since we don't see these Ravagers again until 2026, yes, that is 12 years later. Goodness gracious. So they were off doing some adventures in between Volume 2 and Volume 3. All right, likewise, talk about a wild gap. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2's mid-credit shows Aisha plotting revenge on the Guardians, and of course, we learn in Guardians 3, she's creating Warlock. Well, it took a while, right? In fact, we even learned he wasn't quite done yet. He came out a little too early. So, wow, wild to think that was 12 years. Granted, the blip may have wiped out 5 of them, but still, it was quite a while. Okay, then we have Spider-Man Homecoming's mid-credit scene, which shows Vulture is unwilling to reveal Spider-Man's identity to Matt Gargan. That happens around the same time as the movie itself. Then we have Thor Ragnarok's mid-credit scene showing Thanos' spaceship appearing in front of Thor's ship. Now, this is definitely a good 6 months after the end of the movie, which means it took them a while to travel through space, right? But this scene is happening right before Infinity War. So there is obviously, therefore, a gap in between the end of Ragnarok and this post-credit scene. All right, then we have Black Panther. The mid-credit scene shows T'Challa opening Wakanda up to the world. Now, this one's kind of tricky to figure out. I mean, the movie almost makes you think he turns right around and shows up before the United Nations. But I agree with the wiki. Realistically speaking, to make an appearance before the United Nations isn't going to happen overnight. There's going to be a gap in time. And there's also some tie-in comics, like if you ever read things like the Infinity War Prelude, it gave some indications on timing as well. So it ends up being about 3 months after the end of the movie before he shows up there. Likewise, Black Panther's end credit scene has Bucky being healed from the brainwashing. Well, in that same Infinity War Prelude, it implied that it took Shuri months to finish the brainwashing. So does months, what does it exactly translate into? We don't know. But I appreciate the wiki coming up to the best of their ability with the 5-month gap there. So yeah, it makes sense. They were working on him for quite some time. Okay, then we have Avengers Infinity War. Its end credit scene shows Nick Fury being blipped while calling Captain Marvel for help. That basically happens at the exact same time as the end of the movie. We then have Ant-Man and the Wasp's mid-credit scene, which shows what happens to Scott, Hank, Janet, and Hope, with 3 of them obviously being blipped and Scott being trapped in the quantum realm. That happens at the same time as the end of the movie. Then we have Captain Marvel's mid-credit scene. This one, yes, indeed, does set the record for the most amount of time that isn't a trailer. So Captain America aside, Captain Marvel wins the award for taking 23 years for this to happen. 23 years down to the month. That's kind of cool. But of course, she shows up responding to Fury's call for help. And the reason that I think it's cool to watch things in timeline order, I've heard some people say, I don't like it because it's so weird that we wonder what happened to Captain Marvel for 23 years. That's kind of the point. It is weird, but it's also canon. She was just off in space for 23 years. So it really kind of just solidifies this idea that she's been gone for quite a while. Okay, so then we have Spider-Man Far From Home, and its mid-credit scene shows J. Jonah Jameson airing Mysterio's video, which revealed Spider-Man's identity. That's happening at the same time as the end of the movie. Then we have Spider-Man Far From Home's end credit scene, which shows Talos, R.I.P. Talos, impersonating Fury, who's actually up in space at the time, and this happens at the same time as the end of the movie. Then we have WandaVision, Season 1, Episode 7's mid-credit, which shows Wanda finding the entrance to Agatha's basement. That happens at the same time as the episode itself, so November. Then WandaVision, Episode 8's mid-credit shows Haywood revealing White Vision, which happens at the same time as the episode. And episode number 9, its mid-credit scene shows Wanda getting the message, presumably from Nick Fury, via a Skrull ally. And isn't that interesting? Now we know that the Marvels is going to be at least November of 2026, if not later. So yeah, 3 years have gone by since Monica went up there for that call. Very interesting. But the post-credit scene itself happens at the same time as episode 9. So that's why there's no gap listed. All right, then we have WandaVision, episode 9, the end credit scene, which shows Wanda reading the Darkhold and hearing her children. Now, the wiki looks at this and says it just seems like this is maybe halfway through her learning, because I agree, it doesn't feel like it's right after the end of WandaVision. I mean, she's been working with the Darkhold since the end of WandaVision, since November of 2023. But the wiki kind of splits it down the middle and says it's halfway between the end of WandaVision and her appearance in Multiverse of Madness. That works for me. Again, hopefully the timeline book will lay it out, but I like the wiki's logic. All right, so Falcon and the Winter Soldier, episode 5, has a mid-credit scene showing us a U.S. agent creating a new version of his shield. That happens at the same time as episode 5 itself. And then we have episode 6, which has a mid-credit scene showing Sharon Carter and her nefarious motives. Again, I kind of thought it was going to be a Skrull reveal, and it may still be. I mean, just because Secret Invasion is over doesn't mean there aren't more Skrulls, but you would think they would have figured it out since they would have found Sharon Carter's body, hidden down there. So I'm guessing she ain't a Skrull. She just broke bad. So it's kind of wild to think, since this is May of 2024, and I don't think we're going to see her again until Captain America 4. Wow, she has been gaining intel for quite some time. So yeah, she's going to have a lot of valuable information in that case. Okay, so then we have Loki, Season 1, Episode 4. The mid-credit scene shows Loki arriving in the Void and finding several of his variants. Since the whole show is seemingly outside of time or maybe at the end of time, who knows, right? So it's impossible to calculate this stuff. But nonetheless, this scene is happening at the end of, or at the same time as Episode 4. So there's no gap in time. All right, so then we get the runner-up for the longest gap in time, and that is the Black Widow's end credit scene, which shows Yelena being recruited by Val to go after Hawkeye. That jumps forward a nice 8 years and 6 months. Now, keep in mind, Yelena herself was blipped, so for her it wasn't 8 years and 6 months, but from the timeline standpoint, it was indeed 8 years and 6 months between the movie and its end credit scene. All right, then we have What If, Season 1, Episode 9. The mid-credit scene shows Captain Carter learning that Steve Rogers may be alive. And I don't know what to do with this, right? I mean, it's off in the multiverse, so, it sure seems like it's happening at the same time, basically, as Episode 9. So in that regard, there's really no gap in time, but they're going to have to explain how What If ties to the rest of, the main multiverse. Not the main multiverse, the main 616. So anyway, in the meantime, though, I would view it as no gap in time, even though it's off in the multiverse. All right, then we have Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, and its mid-credit scene shows Wong, Carol, and Bruce looking into the Ten Rings. Now, I do know that a lot of people date this, most people, in fact, in April of 2024, and so does the Wiki. So I want to be clear, this date did not come from the Wiki. However, regardless of whether you put it in April or in July like me, and I have a whole video where I explain why if you want to watch why. More important, for the context of this particular video, there is no gap in time. The Wiki agrees that whenever you place it, the post-credit scene happens at the same time as the movie itself. Same with the second, the end credit scene showing Zhai Ling taking over the Ten Rings organization. No matter when you place the movie, it's happening in the same relative time frame as the movie itself. Talking about controversial placements, we move to Eternals. So Eternals has a mid-credit scene showing some of the team encountering Star Fox and Pip the Troll. Now, the Wiki would place it in 2023, but regardless, it agrees that the gap in time between the movie and the post-credit scene is somewhere between 2 and 3 months. I like it better in October 2024. Again, I've done videos on that, but the bottom line is it happens pretty quickly after the movie itself, which means wherever you place this thing, it's been a while since this scene happened. Man, do we need Eternals 2 to come out and explain all this big time. What has been going on with the Eternals? Likewise, you have the post-credit scene with Dane Whitman trying to decide what to do with the Ebony Blade. The Wiki places it within 1 to 2 months after the end of the movie. So whether you're in 2024 or 2023, it's pretty soon after the movie, and yet we don't know what happened. Did he pick up the blade or not? Come on, Marvel. Give us the answer. Okay, so then it starts to get a little crazy here. All right, so we got Venom Let There Be Carnage's mid-credit scene, which shows Eddie and Venom being transported into 616 due to Doctor Strange's spell going amok. Well, as you probably know if you watched my Spider-Man videos, timeline videos, Venom takes place in November of 2020. So the question is, did he sit around for 4 years and then get pulled into November of 2024 in 616? Or, as I have theorized in some videos, does every universe have a different present day? So present day in Venom's universe is November 2020, but present day in 616 is November 2024. So he's literally pulled out of 2020 into 2024. In that case, there's no gap. So it's either 4 years or no gap. I don't know. This stuff is crazy. Hopefully when Venom 3 comes out and we learn what present day is at that point, we're going to get a good indication of what's going on here. For right now, all we can do is guess. It's one of those two, presumably. All right, then on the flip side, in Spider-Man No Way Home's mid-credit scene, we see Eddie and Venom being returned to the Venomverse, which is either no gap in time or negative 4 years. Or I guess you could argue anywhere between no gap in time and negative 4 years. So, wow. Multiverse timelines, they are confusing. Okay, so then we have Moon Knight, Season 1, Episode 6. Its mid-credit scene shows Jake and Khonshu executing Harrow. And that's basically happening at the same time as Episode 6 itself, so a little bit after the episode. All right, then we have Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. The mid-credit scene shows Stephen heading off with Clea to address an incursion. Okay, so I agree with the Wiki that this sure seems to happen within a month of the movie itself. But my goodness, what have they been up to for now? We're moving into 3 years, right? Because the MCU is moving into 2027. So, will this end up being a snippet of Doctor Strange 3, which is happening much later in the timeline? I don't know. Boy, we really need some of these movies to come out because I want to know where they fit in the timeline. But for now, the post-credit scene seems to be only a month after the movie itself. All right, then we have Miss Marvel, Season 1, Episode 1. Its mid-credit shows Damage Control trying to decide what to do with Miss Marvel. That comes out at the same time as the episode number 1 itself. All right, then we have Thor: Love and Thunder. Its mid-credit scene shows Zeus plotting revenge against Thor. So this is another entry. I think it's the only other one where I have a different timeline than the wiki. The wiki puts it in May of 2024. And regardless, though, of where you place it, 2024 or 2025, this post-credit scene sure seems to be happening right around the time of the movie itself, which is interesting because that means Hercules has been plotting revenge for quite a while because, again, we're moving into 2027. So pretty wild. Hope this all starts to make sense when Marvel gives us some more of these movies. I don't know if we're going to get a Thor 5 or if this will show up as part of something else, but we really do need to know what's been going on. But I could imagine Hercules taking a while to plot this revenge. So, all right. Then we have Thor: Love and Thunder's end credit scene, which shows Jane arriving in Valhalla. That definitely happens at the same time in the movie, whether it's 24 or 2025. All right, then we have She-Hulk episode 9, which has a mid-credit scene showing Wong breaking Blonsky out of prison to come and live in Kamertage. And that happens around the same time as episode 9 itself in August of 2025. All right, so then we have Wakanda Forever's mid-credit scene, which shows Nakia introducing Shuri to young Toussaint. And this happens, again, within a few days, maybe a week of the movie itself, so basically within the same month. All right, then we have Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania's mid-credit scene, which shows the Council of Kangs meeting. And as I alluded to earlier, what do you do with this, right? You basically have the Quantumania in July 2026, and now we're seeing this scene, which I guess is at the end of time. So what do you want to say for this one? How much time is there? Who knows, right? Really, really hope they explain time in the TVA and the Citadel at the end of time. How does it work? All right. Then finally, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3's mid-credit scene, which showed the new Guardians team heading into battle. This one's tricky because based on Groot's growth, you would think this is quite a while in the future. I've heard some, and the wiki has not placed this yet on the timeline, but I've heard some theories they may go with even 2028 because, Groot has clearly grown up. I'm a believer that Groot can control his own growth and or outside factors might happen. Maybe an energy boost hits him and that makes him grow. So I don't necessarily believe it has to be in 2028, but I also could see it being that far. So we'll see where the wiki places it. What do you think? How far after the movie itself do you think this post-credit scene is happening? But I'm going to assume it's at least a while, 8 months, year, etc. Okay, so I asked at the beginning of the video how many post-credit scenes you think, percentage-wise, fall more than 3 months after the movie itself. Personally, I thought it was going to be a ton of them, and I was surprised how many happen relatively close to the movie or show themselves. So here we go. The trailers or snippets, there were 12 post-credit scenes that fall into that category, and every one of them but one, basically, all were many months down the road. So I'm kind of putting those in a different category. You really can't count those because, of course, they're not going to happen at the same time as the current movie. So then let's look at how many that are not trailers or snippets happen in the same month, sometimes within the same day. 54. Out of 84 total, 54. That surprised me. I just thought there'd be a ton that were way out. Then from 1 to 3 months, which isn't too bad, right? 1 to 3 months isn't that far away. There were 6. Then 4 to 6 months, which we're starting to get pretty far out here, but 4 to 6 months, there were 4. And then finally, greater than 7 months, there were only 8. That is amazing that there were only 8 that were that far out. So, okay, Marvel's doing a pretty good job of not giving us these post-credit scenes that happen ridiculously later in the timeline. Still, though, those 8 are impressive because, remember, we talked about, here they are. Here's the 2 biggies. 8 years and 6 months and 23 years. Those take the cake. So, tell me what you think about all this. Do you think Marvel's post-credit scenes should not have such a big gap? Do you think there's too many big gaps, or do you not mind at all? Do you think this is fine? I just found it interesting, and it also really kind of helps you place these things in the timeline. because if you're like me and you really want order in the universe, it really helps to know when to watch some of these post-credit scenes. Okay, so one last reminder, we do have the video or the contest, so I want to make sure to mention that, and I will announce in a video the winner of the contest at the beginning of September. And of course, we have the Discord. So if you want to join the Discord server, and here we are talking about timelines, I will leave a pinned comment with a link to join. Also, if you don't mind, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we'll all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-changing Marvel Cinematic Universe.